Are you ready?
Chuck Liddell's downfall will shock you. Chuck Liddell wasn't just a fighter, he was the face of MMA's wildest era. With his trademark mohawk, icy stare, and devastating knockout power, he carried the UFC out of obscurity and into the mainstream. He was the man who could end a career with a single punch and sell out arenas without saying a word. But behind the highlight reels and pay-per-view glory lies a story few fans truly know. Rumors of financial struggles, tragic memory loss, and a comeback that ended in heartbreak have haunted his legacy. Chuck's journey wasn't just about victories inside the cage. It was about the brutal reality of what happens after the lights go out. And what you're about to hear is the untold story of how the Iceman rose to the top of the fight game, only to watch it all slip away. The birth of the Iceman. Born in Santa Barbara in 1969 and raised by a single mother, Chuck Liddell grew up tough. His grandfather introduced him to boxing as a way to keep him out of trouble, and by high school, Chuck was already a standout in wrestling and football. At Cal Poly, he became a Division I wrestler and even earned a degree in accounting, but life behind a desk was never in the cards.
Straight A student. Straight A.
So I was kind of like, I love this life, but I'm bartending and kickboxing. At some point, I gotta move on. So right when it was starting to go, you know what? It's about time to get a real job. This fight came up. Bare knuckle, no rules. You could groin strikes were legal, headbutts were legal. You couldn't eye gouge, you couldn't bite.
Between bartending shifts and bouncing at nightclubs, Chuck started training in Hawaiian Kempo under John Hackelman at The Pit. It was there that he developed the aggressive, knockout-driven style that would later terrify opponents. One of his earliest fights took place in a makeshift fishnet cage in Brazil. It was gritty, raw, and far from glamorous, but Chuck loved every second. That night planted the seed for a career defined by violence and spectacle. But that was only the beginning. Soon, Chuck would step onto a stage where legends were made. Breaking into the UFC. In 1998, Chuck entered the UFC during its Wild West era. There were minimal rules, barely a nigh regulation, and brutal knockouts were the norm. Chuck fit right in. His blend of wrestling defense and striking power made him nearly impossible to take down, and if you stood in front of him, you were in danger of getting slept.
Oh, bang! That was the shot.
Knocking him out, getting the title I've been after for so long.
With his mohawk, his tattoos, and his cold demeanor, Chuck looked like a video game character come to life. Fans noticed immediately, and promoters quickly realized they had someone special. But Chuck wasn't just fighting in the UFC, he also took fights in Pride FC in Japan, where the rules were even harsher and the competition was fierce. That experience sharpened him further, setting him up for bigger wars back in the States. And while he was making a name overseas, back home, the UFC was about to explode. Rivalries ignite. Chuck's path to superstardom wasn't just about knockouts, it was about rivalries. His friendship and later bitter fallout with Tito Ortiz gave fans the UFC's first mainstream grudge match. Their feud dominated headlines fueled by personal drama and bad blood.
He's not hurting you yet, but Tito has to move.
Liddell remains the light heavyweight champion.
UFC light heavyweight champion, the Iceman, Chuck Liddell.
But before Chuck could take Tito's belt, he ran into Randy Couture. In his first title shot, Chuck came up short against The Natural. It was a painful setback, but one that fueled his obsession with reclaiming glory. The UFC leaned heavily on his image. Chuck became the warrior poster boy for MMA. His fights weren't just events, they were spectacles, with millions tuning in. But nothing could prepare fans for the rematch that would change history. Championship reign. In 2005, Chuck Liddell delivered redemption in brutal fashion. He knocked out Randy Couture and claimed the light heavyweight title. Suddenly, the Iceman wasn't just a fighter, he was the king of the UFC. He defended the belt against Tito Ortiz, Jeremy Horn, and Renato Babalu Sobral. Every knockout added fuel to his legend. Chuck was the man fans came to see, the fighter casual viewers in Chasasum tantly recognized.
This isn't the story of the greatest fighter to ever live.
Oh, this is a slugfest early.
This is the story of the old school.
Chuck trying to tee up. Chuck caught him.
Where MMA was the Wild West.
His popularity spilled into Hollywood. He made cameo appearances in movies, showed up in commercials, and graced magazine covers. For a while, Chuck was untouchable. But the thing about flying too close to the sun is that eventually, you fall. The decline begins. The fall started with Rampage Jackson. In 2007, Chuck was brutally knocked out in a fight that exposed cracks in his armor. His legendary chin, once considered indestructible, was failing him.
Rampaging down.
He's got to jump over Rampage. He's got to try to get it. Now he's going to go for the full guy. It's over.
It's over. This angle, I don't know if Chuck said enough is enough.
I don't know. We will see it from a different camera angle.
Well, he is still down.
It didn't stop there. Losses to Rashad Evans, Keith Jardine, and Rich Franklin followed. Each one ended violently, with Chuck on the canvas. Fans weren't cheering anymore. They were cringing. Dana White, his longtime friend, begged him to retire. Even teammates warned him to stop. But Chuck couldn't walk away. The adrenaline, the lights, the cheers, he couldn't let it go. And yet, Chuck wasn't done chasing that final moment of glory. Retirement and comeback. In 2010, the UFC forced Chuck into retirement. Dana White announced it publicly, framing it as an act of protection.
Who really stands out and who has been a great partner, a great friend, a great champion. The list goes on and on. And I'm here today with my partner Lorenzo Fertitta to announce his retirement.
Come out of retirement and return to the octagon. At 48 years young, it seemed like a far-fetched idea, but for Chuck, it's not.
For a while, Chuck worked behind the scenes with the UFC, collecting a paycheck without taking punches. But in 2016, after the UFC was sold, that paycheck disappeared. Without his ambassador salary and with no pension system in place, Chuck was left with fewer options. In 2018, at 48 years old, he made the shocking decision to return to the cage for a third fight against Tito Ortiz. Promoted by Oscar De La Hoya's Golden Boy MMA, the event promised nostalgia. Instead, fans got tragedy. Chuck looked slow, unprepared, and fragile. Tito Ortiz knocked him out in the first round. The arena went silent. It wasn't a comeback. It was an ending. But here's the truth about Chuck. His story wasn't just about what happened in the cage. Financial struggles. At his peak, Chuck was one of the UFC's highest-paid fighters, making over $1 million per fight. But unlike athletes in other sports, MMA fighters didn't have unions, retirement plans, or guaranteed safety nets. Chuck spent his millions fast, mansions in Cala. Bases, luxury cars, endless parties. He lived like a rock star. But when the fight checks stopped, the bills didn't. Over time, Chuck quietly sold off cars and downsized his lifestyle. His net worth, once rumored to be over $15 million, shrank to under $1 million. Fans assumed he was still rich, but the reality was very different. And as the money faded, so too did the image of invincibility. Health battles. The real cost of Chuck's career wasn't financial. It was physical. Years of absorbing punches left him struggling with memory loss, confusion, and signs of CTE.
Threw a nice hard knee, and because I'd seen all his fights, he won with knees, so I expected hard knees, but... I mean, specifically, probably no.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not specifically, yeah. But yeah, that's happened.
Do people try to...
It was nice to know, he gave me a clean shot to the body, and I could take it, so... And like what he's saying, if somebody was messing with somebody, I got up on one. And a lot of times that's right.
Friends noticed he would forget conversations or repeat the same stories. Interviews showed a slower, more subdued Chuck. The Iceman wasn't just aging, he was deteriorating. He admitted openly that he missed the life of a fighter, even though it had left him broken. For Chuck, the fight never really ended, and the hits didn't stop there. His personal life was about to collapse too. Scandals and family struggles. In 2021, Chuck was arrested after a domestic incident at his home. Although charges were later dropped and he claimed he took the blame to protect his family, the headlines were brutal.
Chuck Liddell had a response to his arrest for an alleged domestic violence incident. He says, last night the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department deputies who responded were professional. While the information about this case will be revealed in due course, I believe it's important to convey and clarify a few facts about the situation.
Soon after, he filed for divorce from his wife, Heidi Northcott. Friends say the split left him emotionally and financially drained. The home, once filled with trophies and celebrations, now felt more like a shrine to the past. Worse still, Chuck's relationship with his children grew strained. He loved them deeply, but between divorce, financial pressure, and his mental decline, he struggled to be present. And that's when fans realized Chuck Liddell's biggest battle wasn't in the octagon. It was with himself. The legacy of the Iceman. Chuck Liddell's story is more than just wins and losses. He was the face of the UFC's rise, the man who helped turn cage fighting into a global sport. He inspired a generation of fighters and carried the company on his shoulders during its most critical years. But his fall is also a cautionary tale about the dangers of fighting too long, the lack of safety nets for MMA legends, and the harsh reality of what happens when the spotlight moves on. Today, fans still cheer for Chuck when he appears at events. They still comment, "You still got it," on his social media posts. But the truth is bittersweet. The Iceman is no longer the destroyer of worlds. He's a reminder of the cost of glory. Chuck once said, "I don't want to live a boring life. I want to look back and say that was wild." And maybe he got his wish. But as the years pass, his story reminds us that even legends melt when the ice runs out.